Hello, everybody. Here we are on Women in Climate Change webinar in English this time. So we have only a part of our guests. We lose the other one, so we're hoping to recover their presence later. So here with me is Meganne Chistian, a researcher from CNR, which was part of the Italian expedition in Antarctica, and international journalist, internazionale, a journalist from Internazionale, Sara Manisera, which won an award of the United Nations with a documentary about Iraq without water. So please, let's talk about women and climate change, climate crisis. Please, Sarah, tell us about your story and your work.
Hello, everybody. How are you? Hope you're doing well. My name is Sara Manisera. I'm an independent reporter and journalist. So I'm not working for Internazionale. Internazionale is one of the main media I work with, but I work for and with different international and Italian outlets. My work started like as a journalist a few years ago in Lebanon, and I started working in Middle East, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, focusing mainly on civil society, youth, environment. In the recent years, with another woman who is a photojournalist, Arianna Pagani, we have produced several in depth stories and multimedia projects to tell the story of a group of young Iraqi environmentalists. And that's why I went to New York uh, 3 weeks ago to get this international award by the UN, because of the work I did in Iraq in 2019 and 2018, which is Iraq Without Water. Iraq Without Water is a web documentary that you can navigate because it's an open website in English and Italian. It's a multimedia project that follows the course of the Tigris River, tracing the main environmental issues in Iraq, which are climate change, water pollution, salinization, dams, lack of internal water policies, as well as the impact on the local population. It is an interactive storytelling project, and it's a journey from Mosul, which is in the north of the country in Iraq, and ends this journey in Basra, in the south, which is a city situated on the Shat al Arab, um, the waterway formed by the Tigris and Euphrates Rivers Union. This web documentary is very important because the main protagonists are young environmental activists. In general, they are between 15 years old and 25, 30 years old, and they stand up for the environment. We have to consider that Iraq, it's the country of rivers, it's the country of Mesopotamia, it's the country of the cradle of civilization, and several factors are damaging and impacting the flow of these rivers. And we, as human beings in general, we should protect this important area, because Mesopotamia is a region of great cultural and natural importance, which belongs not only to Iraq but to whole humanity. We have to consider that the main problem of water in Iraq depends on the construction of dams built in the north by Turkey and Iran, with the, let's say, the help, the support, and the funds of several European and US companies. At the same time, we have to consider that the other bigger problem concern the water issue in Iraq is the oil companies, which are specifically in the south of Iraq, which are contaminating with the land and the water. Um, of course, there are other problems, as I said before: mismanagement, poor and old and obsolete agriculture practices, and of course, we have to keep in mind that um, a war and the violent conflicts in the last 30 years have badly affected Iraq and have badly affected the infrastructures of the country. But what is important to me is telling the story of a group of young Iraqi activists who grew up before or after 2003, so before or after the US invasion, and they rejected the violence, and they are using the peace in order to build a better future, and they are standing up for the environment. um, that's I think that's today is very important, especially for a journalist. For journalists, we as a journalist, we should highlight these voices and stress the voices of the youth. We should put at the center not only the problems. Of course, in this web documentary, that you can navigate freely. You can definitely understand which are the factors that are depriving most of the Iraqis of their right to water. But at the same time, we want to offer a solution. And that's why we put at the center of this web documentary the voices of uh, a new generation of Iraqis who is standing for the environment and is standing for the right to water. And let me conclude with an important issue regarding the protests, because 2 years ago, before the COVID, before the pandemic, in Iraq, there were huge protests, a huge manifestation against the government. And one of the main reason was lack of water in the south of Iraq. And we have to think that this country is very rich in oil, is exporting oil everywhere, using their energy and their raw material, but at the same time, we are depriving them of their a basic and fundamental right, which is the right to water. And we have to keep in mind another issue, which is fundamental. In the coming years, this area, especially Middle East area, will be affected a lot by the climate crisis. And if we don't act now, we will face a lot of problems, because a huge like millions of people will be forced to move and to leave that area. So it's time now to talk about the real emergency, which is climate crisis, which is water. And we have to protect a land where the civilization was born, where the Sumerians, because we keep in mind like Iraq as the country of war. But before being a country of war, a country of destruction, a country of terrorism, was a country of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, was a country of civilization, was the country of Sumerians, was the country where Ur, Eridu, Uruk, the agriculture was born. And we have to keep in mind that. And we have to remind people that Iraq is beyond terrorism. Iraq is more than terrorism. Is a country full of history, of archaeological and natural heritage, and altogether we should protect this worldwide heritage.
Thank you, Sari. It's so important because I think that this situation is not so known outside, because when we are talking about climate changes, about climate crisis, we are used to think to Africa, we think to Antarctica, we think to the polar bears, but maybe I personally cannot, I didn't know about Iraq situation. And I didn't know about these activists in Iraq. So it's an important story to tell people about.
Yeah,
And
but
I have
I think, Camelia, sorry to interrupt you. I think that's the main problem sometimes with the media and journalists, is that they try all the time to focus on, okay, what is cool now? Daesh, Islamic State, terrorism. Okay, but I think that it's time to overcome this narrative, to change the narration, and to put at the center not only climate change but also climate solutions. And these activists are. That's why I'm saying, yeah, of course, if you navigate the web documentary, you will understand the reasons behind the climate crisis and the water crisis in Iraq. But you will find also the solutions, because those activists are offering, proposing some solution. For example, they're saying, if we want to face the climate crisis, and if we want to keep the Tigris and Euphrates River um, um, like a common rivers for all the people living in the Middle East, we should work on an um, transboundary agreement between the countries who are sharing these waters, which means that the international countries should push Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Syria to sign an agreement to share the water. We have in Europe this kind of agreement to share common basins, let's say common water basins. So it's time that also in the Middle East we should push diplomacy to work on this regard. For example, another solution is, let's try to avoid the construction of dams, because dams are changing the landscape and are depriving some people who are living in the south of the right to water, because if you block the water on the north, the water doesn't go to the south, doesn't reach the southern areas of Iraq. Second, third, we should put accountability. The oil companies, European and US oil companies, which work in Iraq, and we should control what they're doing there, because we are using that oil. Iraq is the second country with in terms of reserve of oil, and we are using oil to produce plastic, to produce everything we use every single day in our lives. So there are solutions, but we need to talk about solutions, not only about problems. And that's why I wanted to put at the center of the story um, the voices of these young environmental activists.
uh, can you tell us something more about the award you won with this documentary?
So yeah, briefly, I you the Association of United Nations Correspondents awarded me the prize, the award for the climate change reporting. And for me, it was an honor because this web documentary was not even published by some media, because it was produced by an Italian NGO, which is Un Ponte Per, a bridge with, uh, and it's interesting to see that none of the Italian magazines or or journals or newspapers or media were interested in publishing the story. So and it gives you the idea of you know which are the priorities for those media. But I'm proud that I did this story because I believe in this story, and I found an Italian NGO which supported us and gave us the money and helped us to find some budget, because as you can imagine, to produce a web documentary you need money and you need to go on the field, and we spent almost 40 days on the field, traveling from the north to the south, interviewing the activists, filming, shooting all the time. So you need money to do this kind of web documentary. But I'm very proud that at least at least well, the UN Association of Correspondents recognized this work, and I had the chance to talk to a very international audience in New York. Most of them work for UN agencies, and I could share with them this work. And I hope that maybe some UN agencies will allocate some budget in the climate change in Iraq.
Well, let me share this documentary because I shared on the as a comment this site, and as you said, yes, it's not fashionable. It's not something that it's on the top of the interest of Italian journalism. But let me share this site.
And let me just say something while you are sharing the web documentary. Is a website is and free, and everybody can just navigate anytime they want. Like you can have some time tonight and you start navigate the web documentary, then you stop and then you can continue the day after. That's the idea of a web documentary. You choose the time, you choose when navigate it and when scroll it and when read it actually. And it's a mix of audio, photos, maps, and text. So the idea is to work on different forms of journalism, and actually is very useful also for schools because for example teachers or professors during their lessons can definitely open a tab and share these project with their students and comment while navigating. It's very interactive, and it's something different. And well, in US, like New York Times and Washington Post, is you can find a lot of interactive project like this one. Uh, we in Italy, we are not so advanced in this sense.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I shared everything. You can find this site also in Italian and English, so you can scroll, as Sarah said, everything. And I think also something like a timeline about the history of the places, maps, and so on. So for sure, a lot of information about this this situation, the situation of water in Iraq. Thank you so much, Sarah. I know that you have another thing to follow. So thank you to you found the time to be with us.
It's
And
a pleasure. Thank you very much for the invitation. I will stay with you another 30 minutes, but then I have to leave you. I'm so sorry.
thank you. That's I only hope that something could change, could move, and I hope you will join us in other future situations. So thank you so much for this time. And I want to welcome also to Faisal Ali, which is a Wikipedian. Faisal Ali Da Supremo is the username. Can you hear us, Faisal?
Yeah, I can hear you. Good evening, everyone.
Unfortunately,
Unfortunately, can you hear
we
me? Hello?
okay. We
Hello?
hear you,
Okay,
Faisal.
we
Faisal.
hear you. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm Faisal from Ghana. I'm user the Supremo on Wikipedia. Um, I translate for articles from English to Hausa, and I'm in the same group with Camelia on the Wikimedians of sustainable development. I don't know if I've gotten the right words. I saw a link
Don't worry,
to
Jan.
the.
Jan, don't. I
Pardon?
hear the echo. I hear the echo.
Oh, okay. I saw the link Camelia posted on the page, and I decided to follow. Actually, I'm also a co-founder of an NGO in Ghana. We deal in with kids. We show them how to um, plant trees concerning the climate change. So last year we went to some schools in Ghana and we taught the kids how to plant trees and also talk to them about the sustainable development goals. And the part of our NGO, we deal in four SDGs. So we deal in the quality education, climate action, leadership, and life above water.
Thank you,
So
Faisal.
yeah, so I decided to translate the articles. I saw Dr. Plant genetics writing articles. I also saw some articles in Italiano. So I actually translate them from English to Hausa so that my community can also know what women in other parts of the countries do, so that we can also replicate here in Ghana. So that's a little about me.
Thank you so much, Faisal. I need to mute you because when I'm talking, because I hear the echo. So thank you so much. I saw you wrote a lot of articles. You wrote in Hausa, which is one of the languages spoken in Nigeria. So I hope that our fans from Wikimedia Nigeria and the other user groups from Nigeria can follow this web binder. And thank you for being here because I saw you wrote so many articles, so many biographies. What I'm sorry is we lose Adenike Olasold, which which was at the beginning, and then we lose her. We need to have Carol Mwaura hope to have her because they have problems, issues with electricity in during this time. So I hope to solve all these problems. Um, let's talk with Meganne. Meganne was part of the Italian expedition in Antarctica, and she has a lot of great things to tell us.
All right, I'll share with you my slides. Just a second. Share screen. Okay, here we go. So yes, as Camelia said, I spent a year in Antarctica with the French-Italian expedition at Concordia Station, which I'll tell you some more about. And then I also went back for a summer campaign another year later. So these are some beautiful photos of the winter time. They weren't actually taken by me, they were taken by some of my colleagues. And I'll show you a lot more photos as we go along. So Antarctica, as you know, is where the South Pole is. So it's not especially easy to get there. From Italy, the way we went was flew to either Australia or New Zealand, and then caught one of these military airplanes, the C-130, down to the Italian station on the coast of Antarctica called Mario Zucchelli Station. And from there, a smaller aeroplane, a Buzzler DC-3, off to Concordia. So from New Zealand, it takes something like 7 hours. And then it's another 4 hours from Mario Zucchelli to Concordia. And that's with the 30-hour journey to New Zealand in the first place from Italy. So it's a fairly long trip. There are other ways of getting there. So the second time I went there, I flew from Tasmania on a much more comfortable Airbus plane, and then took the ship back from a French station, Dumont d'Urville, on the coast of Antarctica back to Hobart. So there are a few different ways that we have of getting there. So Concordia is in a location called Dome C, and there are a number of reasons why this location was chosen, partly because it's on 3,300 meters of ice. So that's really good for glaciology studies. The atmosphere there, because of the high altitude, is really favorable for doing astronomical observations. It's also inside the polar vortex, which makes it an ideal location to study the hole in the ozone layer. It's a long way from other Antarctic bases and any marine perturbations. So it's a good position also for other geophysical observatories like geomagnetism and studies of earthquakes, that kind of thing. That way you can fill a large gap in the global network of data. Also, another quite different part is the fact that the conditions are so isolated and it's such a hostile environment that it's an interesting place to study human behavior. So these are conditions which are quite similar to space missions. So the European Space Agency has a presence at Concordia, and during the winter sends a research doctor there to study the people on the expedition. So the position was originally chosen, the exact location was originally chosen for this project called EPICA, European Project for Ice Coring in Antarctica. They did a map of the land underneath the ice and found a location that would be perfect for studying the climate through ice coring back as long as possible. So in 2004, they reached the bottom of their ice core of 3,270 meters, and they cut this ice core down into small slices. And in each of these slices, there were bubbles, which are the trapped gases from the atmosphere. and they correspond to different periods over time. So they were able to produce this really famous graphic, which tells us, correlates the time period back 800,000 years with the levels of methane and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And you can also correlate that with the temperature. And as you can see here, this was the conclusion they came to in the article, was that today's concentrations of these greenhouse gases have no past analog in the ice core record back as far as 800,000 years. And indeed, we're up here where these stars are, which we all know. We all acknowledge that climate change is real, I hope. This data from Dome C really confirmed that. And just in these last few years, there's a new project called Beyond Epica, which has just started in a location about 45 kilometers away from Concordia. And that is an even better location because they will be doing an ice core that goes back as far as 1.5 million years. And that's a really important period to study because there are a lot of paleoclimatological changes during that time. So we'll have even more information about the cycles of gases in the atmosphere and the temperature during those periods. So this was the first camp at Dome C. This tent, this big white tent in the middle here, is where they did that ice core. These are dormitories. Also, these are sleeping tents. And then there are various warehouses and containers with their tools. So at that point, there was no base. There was just a camp. Then the agreement between France and Italy to construct the station itself was signed in 1993. And over a period of many years, they constructed the station, as you can see in these photos, and it was completed in 2005, and that's when they opened for its first winter, DC1. The winter that I did was DC15. So how did they get all the supplies to such a remote location? It's 1,200 kilometers from the coast, so it's a very long way, and obviously heavy things like everything that you need to construct the base couldn't be all transported by aeroplane. So there is something called the raid or the traverse, which comes from the coast of Antarctica to Concordia Station over a period of 11 to 16 days. It's a very, very slow journey. And they bring everything along. So even now, every year, there are 2 to 3 of these raids, bringing food, scientific supplies, extra supplies for constructing various shelters and containers around the base. And then they go away and take all the waste with them. So now this is Concordia Station today. And the main sciences that are studied there are astronomy and astrophysics, atmospheric sciences, earth sciences, glaciology, human biology, and remote sensing. And Antarctica, as you probably know, is a continent of absolute records. It is the most isolated. It is the coldest, the most arid. It's actually a desert. It has the highest average height above sea level. So the average height is something like 2,500 meters or so, and there are mountains that go up to 5,000 meters. There are even volcanoes in Antarctica. And by far the highest area is the Eastern Antarctic Plateau where Concordia is. So as I said, Concordia itself is at an altitude of 3,233 meters. And that is a lot like 4,000 meters in our kind of latitudes, because at the poles, the air is a lot thinner. So the kind of atmospheric pressure that you get there at 3,200 meters is a lot lower than what you would get here. So it's a bit like being on a 4,000 meter mountain. It has the highest wind speed, particularly at the coast. In the center where Concordia is, the wind speed is not very high because basically the air starts there and then rolls out towards the coast, and it gets faster and faster as it goes downhill. And so you get very, very high wind speeds on the coast. Of course, it's also the largest freshwater reserve on the planet with all that ice. I think it's something like 70% of the Earth's fresh water. Now, to go there, we had to do a bunch of training to be able to survive those kind of crazy isolated conditions. We did it with the crew that was staying at the station, the Mwaura Faisal Ali station. So we also had to do some training in dry suits in the water and driving boats around and that sort of thing. One of the very important things was to learn how to put out fires because it's very, very dry, as I mentioned. And also the fact that you're on this 3 kilometers of ice means that you can't have you can't ground your electric devices, so you get a lot of static electricity, and that could spark a fire. So we did a lot of training firefighting. Trying to go ahead. Yes. We also went on to we did camping on the glacier on Mont Blanc. Just to, do some team building and get some experience in extreme conditions, even though it's nothing like what it's really like in Antarctica. And there in the bottom right was the final week of training that we did with just the 13 of us that were there for the winter over. We did more team building activities and more camping and so on. It's a bit slow at going ahead. So as I said, the first time I went, I left from New Zealand, Christchurch in New Zealand. That's me, the first time I put on my Antarctic gear. Then this is on the C-130 aeroplane. And this was the very exciting first view out of the tiny little window that there was of Antarctica. Seeing the sea ice out from the window was very exciting. From there, I arrived at Mwaura Faisal Ali station on the coast. And as you can see, not everything is covered in ice. Antarctica is a continent, so there is land. And in the coastal sections, there are areas that are not actually covered in ice. Then finally, this photo is from the window of my bedroom the day that I arrived at Concordia. So from my bedroom, I could see some of the laboratories where I would be working. This is a drone video of the base. So as you can see, there are 2 towers. There's a noisy tower and a quiet tower. And the noisy tower contains the workshops, the kitchen, the gym, the living area, whereas the quiet tower contains the hospital, the bedrooms, and the offices. Then all around the base, there are containers for our food and all the supplies that we need. And then there are various laboratories. So these here are all shelters containing laboratories. This is the astronomy one, for example, another astronomy one, as well as some atmospheric physics. This is also atmospheric chemistry, let's say. This is a physics shelter. This is an earthquake shelter, studying earthquakes. And then this is a meteorological tower. And these are from about 300, 400 meters from the base up to about 1 kilometer from the base. To give you an idea of the kind of weather that there is at Concordia, I'll just run this video at the same time. That's on a particularly windy day. As I said, there's not that much wind at Concordia, but sometimes there is, and you get some pretty whiteout conditions. On the left here, we have the temperature trends. And I think here is the lowest temperature that there has ever been measured at Concordia, which was about minus 84 degrees. During the summer, that's during the winter, obviously. During the summer, on the other hand, it's an average of about minus 30. But the year that I was there, we actually got up to minus 15, which was quite anomalous. So you can't really take one data point as a reference, but recently we've been seeing more and more high temperatures during the summer and cold temperatures during the winter, which is an interesting, I won't go into it now, but it's an interesting phenomenon. So you also have to take into account the wind chill factor. And when the temperature is so cold, the wind chill factor is quite important. So this was the coldest that we got to. The temperature was minus 79 degrees, but with the wind, that was minus 104 degrees. And several of us had to work outside every single day. So yes, I did experience being outside in minus 104 degrees Celsius. Trying to go ahead. You probably know that during the summer, you have 24 hours of sun. And during the winter, you have 24 hours of darkness per day. There is a period in between where you get some kind of, day-night alternatives, but for summer period, it's always sunny, and for winter period, it's always dark. So it's quite an adjustment, and your body never really adapts properly to this. So that this video is the course of one entire day during the summer. The communications system, we had access to WhatsApp, so we could write to our families and so on. And we also could do Skype video conferences, but the bandwidth was very, very limited, and most of it was used for sending scientific data. This is just to show you that we actually managed to have a conversation, a video conversation with the ISS, that's Luca Parmitano, and they had better internet bandwidth than we did. So they were getting their video was perfect, whereas ours was very, very delayed. So the projects that I was working on were several. The first one was the Baseline Surface Radiation Network, which is a series of radiometers to measure the solar and infrared radiation fluxes. And this gives us an idea of the energy balances on the planet, especially when we add all the data from all over the world, because BSRN is a big network, it's all over the world. And so if you put all that data together, you can get the energy balances of the planet, which is really good information for studying climate change. Of course, you also get an idea of the regional climatic models, and it's also important for validating and calibrating satellite observations. So apart from looking after this data, the manual work that I had to do was basically look after these instruments by going out there and removing the ice from them with this little hairdryer and paintbrush every day. This is one of those radiometers is on the American Tower, that tall tower that I showed you in the drone video. And this tower is 45 meters high. And during the winter, it's very, very cold, as you saw. And we have to go up and clean all the instruments once per week. This is another drone video. It's not excellent quality because it was obviously very dark. What you see coming towards you on the screen are actually ice crystals. It's not snow because it's far too cold to actually snow there, and the level of precipitation is very, very low. So that is the American Tower. Another project is routine meteorological observations, so basically weather reporting. We had a small tower with various instruments to check the temperature, and once again I had to go and clean those every week just because they, snow and ice built up on them. I had to take care of the instruments. This was a ceilometer for looking at cloud cover, and unfortunately during the winter it got this big crack in it, so I had to take care of that kind of thing. And every day I would launch a radio sonde using one of these weather balloons. And this would measure the atmospheric conditions going up into the atmosphere over Concordia. And sometimes we would write messages on the balloons. So, for example, on International Women's Day, I wrote this balloon about women in science, the sky is no limit. And on particularly windy days, it can be a bit scary launching the balloon. This was on my husband's birthday, so I wrote a message to him. And it was very, very windy. I nearly got carried away with the balloon, as you can see. Most days it's not a problem, but sometimes it's like this, just to give you an idea of the extreme conditions. This is about 25 knots of wind, I think. But it went. In my spare time, because we did have spare time, I decided to make a program to work out where all those sondes had landed. And it was quite interesting because some of them would land near the base. They didn't go very far, or they just did a tour around the base and then came down a couple of kilometers away. But some of them actually went up to 300 kilometers away. Another project was the stratospheric LiDAR, which is a laser, as you can see in these photos here. And it's to measure the optical properties of the clouds in the troposphere and the stratosphere above all, because during the winter there are polar stratospheric clouds, and on these clouds there are reactions with ozone to degrade ozone. So it gives us an idea of the hole in the ozone layer. Another project was atmospheric aerosol, some complicated instruments basically sampling air to test the level of contamination of pollutants that there were in the air. Because if there are pollutants coming there and the ones that are not generated by the base itself, then it means that it's a pretty bad situation in the rest of the world. On the other hand, it should be a baseline because it should be an uncontaminated zone. This project called SuperDAN was one that I didn't do during the winter, but I did during the second summer that I went back to Concordia for. It's an ionospheric radar, and there are a lot of these radars in the polar regions. So it's an international network, and it's dedicated to the study of plasma physics, or really space weather, so the interaction between the sun and the Earth's atmosphere. And during the summer, we have to repair all these cables, that are the many cables on the radar, because they tend to get broken during the winter in the harsh conditions. So that involves going up in this cherry picker to repair them all. And finally, I was also involved in the White Mars projects by the European Space Agency as a test subject. So every month we would have our blood taken, and we would do tests of cognition and that kind of thing, just to see whether we were, improving, getting worse. One particularly interesting project was the Soyuz simulator. So the Soyuz is this Russian capsule that is used to reach the International Space Station. And we had a simulator at Concordia to dock on the International Space Station with the Soyuz. And we learnt how to do that in the first summer. And then we had tests during the year to work out whether how our skills went over time. And that's all to understand what it could be like on a long-term mission, for example, to Mars. Just some little fun aspects. Obviously, safety is really important at Concordia. So if you need to evacuate the station for a fire, for example, you have to use these escape socks. So that's just a video of us practicing with the escape socks, which is quite fun. We did a lot of outreach activities. So we did about 70 to 80 calls with schools, high schools, primary schools, public events, all sorts of outreach, because we're in a really privileged position to be able to talk about what we were learning about climate change and to really raise awareness about it. Of course, we had free time and we had parties. We made a lot of pasta together. We have these camels in the middle of nowhere that we can go for a walk to. There's billiards. There's poker, and also there is a sauna. So I have experienced a difference in temperature of 180 degrees because I went in the sauna at 90 degrees Celsius and then went outside at -90 during the winter. This photo was not taken there in the winter. It was in the summer, obviously, but it was still around -40 degrees. And just some...
Thank you, Sarah. Sorry, Sarah, I need to leave, so thank you so much.
Thank you. And finally, just some photos for you to appreciate what it's like in the change of season, which is the most beautiful period for being at Concordia, because you're just starting to see the sun come back and you get a lot of beautiful sunsets and sunrises. This is a radiometer. Some of the shadows under the shelters. And then because I'm actually a materials scientist, I'm not a natural scientist, I went there with the idea of things that, what could I do as a materials scientist? And this is what I'm hoping to do in the future, to improve the situation at Concordia, facilitate the research in those environments. So one of the things is that everything is powered by gasoline. which is really bad, obviously, for the environment. It's the easiest thing to do, but it's A, bad for the environment, and B, bad for the experiments, because obviously that's contaminating any of the experiments that you're doing, contaminating the results. So being able to introduce alternative energy sources is something that I'd like to look into, solar panels and so on. They do have some test solar panels, but there are a lot of things that could be done to improve and increase that. Also improving the equipment. So for example, as you can see in this photo, these glasses are really, this ski mask is really frosted over. So using nanomaterials, for example, to de-ice these both the equipment and also the experiments, because they get a lot of buildup of ice, and that's why we have to go out there every day and remove the ice and snow. So that's it from me. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Meganne. It was for sure a wonderful experience.
Yes.
Oh, yes, it's not so usual to go in Antarctica for sure, and to have all this experience. Is some of these projects you are still working, turning back from, so you are continuing to study on these projects, or?
So the all the experiments that I mentioned, they're actually permanent observatories. I should have also said that the base is run by the Italian National Italian Research, Antarctic Research Program, and also the French Antarctic Research Program. And these are all permanent observatories. So they are ongoing for as long as the base survives, basically. So somebody goes there every year to look after them, just like I did. And there are people, the principal investigators, who are in charge of each of the experiments. Sometimes there are new experiments that come in. Sometimes something finishes off. But they're all, the ones that I mentioned are all permanent observatories, and all the data goes into international databases that can be accessed by all scientists around the world.
Thank you. So we unfortunately could not keep the connection with Adenike, which was at the beginning of our webinar, where was not live, were a private discussion. So we cannot recover her intervention participation. So what I want to do is to run a video she put on Twitter. So let me see here.
Restricted access or right to own and use land. I am Oladosu Adenike, an eco-feminist, family justice activist that intercepts the environmental injustice with women's rights and justice. And yes, women's right to land matter. And in our words today, one, it could help to empower women for them to become landowners, to be able to depend on or be able to survive the harsh condition, and for them to build resilience against the climate change crisis and to contribute to the indigenous knowledge. Secondly, it could also help them to tackle the climate change crisis by them reducing hours that they need to spend in getting these resources distance or in trying to use all of these resources. And thirdly, it could also help as a way of reducing gender-based violence, because we have seen it for the fact that the more these resources are depreciated, the greater the violence it includes or it involves. Because globally, women own just 24% of the landscape that they need for agricultural processes, but yet produces 60 to 80% of the food population. And you could imagine if we could now give women the total access to own the land, it could help reduce poverty, hunger, food insecurity, and likewise improve gender equality. And studies over time have shown the fact that improving gender inequality or improving gender equality to say that it could help for climate adaptation and mitigation approaches. And that is why it is important for women's rights to land to be improved in order for us to have sustainability and to tackle inequalities and for us to be able to, for women to be able to become part of the decision making of our time. Thank you.
So thanks to Adenike. I'm so sorry we couldn't have her here as a guest. Maybe some connection. And also we missed Elizabeth Batuti, which is another young climate activist from Kenya. And we missed also Carol Mwaura. We have a lot of missing people in this moment on this webinar. I'm so sorry, but it seems we have connection problems from from their country. Thank you, Meganne. I only want to share some basic information on this campaign. Let me share the screen. So, excuse me. No, so this is a webinar made for Women in Climate Change campaign, and I'm Camelia Boban from WikiDonne user group, which is the organizer of this campaign. What is WikiDonne? It's a project in Wikipedia. It's also an affiliate user group and then NGO association. It aims to increase the diversity and improve coverage of topics about women, minorities, different abilities, LGBT plus communities, underrepresented groups in Wikimedia projects. This is the page of our project in Italian Wikipedia. This is a page of our affiliate on Meta, and this is the association site. This is the page of this campaign 2021 in Meta. Is a second edition. We organized also the last time together with Wikimedia Foundation Consortia, Sustainability Consortia. And this is a list of women biographies we found it to be written that are missing in some of those languages, as you can see in the table. To talk about talking about Wikipedia, it's maybe all of us, all of you know what Wikipedia is. It's excuse me, just a moment. Maybe someone needs. Yes, we have Faisal again. Yes. So let's turn back to our slides. So as I said, Wikipedia is the 13 most visited site in the world. And talking about Wikipedia, we have a problem of the gender gap in Wikipedia, diversity in general, and specifically about the gender gap in Wikipedia. One of the latest researches was that 19% Wikipedia editors are male, only 9% are female, and 1% are transgender or transsexual. And this is a tool which name is Humanity, which provides statistics about the gender gap in the Wikimedia projects. So you can see here the difference between the female content and the male content in our project. This is the main page of Wikipedia. As you can see, Wikipedia has a lot of a lot of languages. Excuse me, but I think another people. Yes, I think that Faisal is coming down, coming down, is coming down. Um, so unfortunately, I need to stop the train because I cannot see the screen and accept the participants if I cannot stop. So this is the main page of Wikipedia. As you can see, you can choose one of the languages. Wikipedia has in this moment, I think, something like 330 languages, but no, 314 languages, 304 are active. These are numbers about the page views, the devices, registered users, active editors, and so on. And this is the statistic site. And talking about Wikipedia, it's an online free and collaborative encyclopedia that uses open source software which is named MediaWiki. Everybody can participate, everybody can edit Wikipedia, and all the content is released with CC by Star licenses, free licenses. Wikipedia has 5 pillars, so these are the rules, the main rules of the Wikipedia, which stays this way, that cannot be changed. So the first is Wikipedia is an encyclopedia. Wikipedia is written from a neutral point of view. Has free content that anyone can edit, use, and distribute. Wikipedia's editors should treat each other with respect and civility, which means Wikinet. And Wikipedia has no film rules. So, is an encyclopedia means that you can insert only public domain material, you can translate, you cannot put copyrighted material or I don't know, personal theories or opinions, promotional or celebratory pages, and so on. Writing content in a neutral point of view means that you need to put content point of view in an equitable manner, proportional with relevance and without prejudice. We don't accept original sources, so we are talking about unproved facts and theories, because everything was need to have the reliable resources. The content is free, so it means that everybody can redistribute the content. Just need to sign to say that are Wikipedia editors. It's as you can see, it's has no publicity, so it's ad free. We are trying always to use free software and open formats. and it's not. We don't have an editorial line, so it's not until we don't have a that is some someone who said what we need to write and how we should write it. Otherwise, out of the five pillars, and it's a collective work. So articles don't belong to do not belong to anyone. As we said, we have an etiquette, which is etiquette, which means that you need to assume good faith, and we have some technical rules that you cannot go back a page more than 3 times in 24 hours, that you don't need to fuel the change word, edit words, to be, you need to be gentle, uh, to work toward an agreement, and don't ignore questions, be ready to apologize, and so on. There are no firm rules, means that accepting the five pillars in Wikipedia don't have fixed rules, so everything can be discussed, recommendation or guidelines by the community with a mechanism of consent. As we said, as I said, we use the licenses, free licenses, as City by Star, Creative Commons by share alike, also public domain and the new license. To be able to write on Wikipedia, you can write even without registration, but registration gives you some more opportunities. This is a usual form that you can find in every site. So you can enter a username, a password. You need to confirm the password. You need to set the email address in order to recover the credentials if you don't remember them, and security check, and just create your account. How is organized Wikipedia? It's organized in main spaces, so we can have the main space which contains the articles, then main spaces of users, of templates, of categories, of help pages, and so on. The top page means it's the page. Every article in Wikipedia has a top page. Has a top page, means that you can communicate with other users about this topic, and you need only to put your comment, your message, and you have the choice to show the preview, so you can precisely see what would look your comment, your edit, and after this confirm that this message, and everything starts with a sandbox. So for especially for new users, you need to write in the sandbox. So not directly on the Wikipedia. So you can create a sandbox under your namespace user by starting a new article, and you can use you can try to use you have two choices: to use a visual editor, which is a kind of common editor, text editor. You can put the paragraphs. You can choose templates. You can insert a citation and photo images and so on. At the beginning, publish the page, or you can for the more for expert editors, you can choose to use the wiki text, which is a kind of science that um, when you save the page, you can see all the changes. In this case, I highlight the bold of this biography. I highlighted the wiki link, which is an internal link to another page in Wikipedia. I highlighted the section. So at the end, everything wrote on the provide page looks like this. So you can see the institute, you can see the wiki links. There are not notes here, but can be done. So it's not on the example. Every page has a history page, so as you can see, you can read the page, you can edit, you can edit with the wiki text, but you can also see the history of the page. So every change was done on this page. Who done it, the time, the date, the username, what was done, how many bytes was changed, and so on. Also, you can also choose to thank something was edited. So say thank you to someone who edited something that you love. And in Wikipedia, in English is not are disabled, but in other languages you can choose to translate from other languages using the translation tool. We prepared a book to wiki guides, and you can find them on Commons. So we have the links at the end. So these wiki guides help you to start editing on Wikipedia. These are our links. You can find. We will also share this slides later at the end. And I want to share with you this.
We need to wake up. We need to wise up. We need to open our eyes and do it now, now, now. We need to build a better future.
So I don't know. Did we have the audio for this video or not, Meganne? Ah,
Yes, yes, we did.
because I know that sometimes StreamYard don't allow to, not StreamYard, the Google Slides don't allow to have the audio of the videos. But yes, it's let me see if I can. Okay, it's okay. So we finished. We finished everything. We still don't have our other guests. So thank you, Megan, for this. You are about telling us about your adventure.
Thank you for having me. I always enjoy talking about that adventure. I can't resist, so very happy to.
Thank you so much. So bye, everybody. See you the next time. Thank you.